Johnson, and I play Ellie.
So first cinematic here. You'll see as we get to the end, I mean, this opening image, we wanted to match what we did at the end with image of Ellie.
Tommy, listen to me. He is the contract.
I think it's such an interesting thing to start off with, not only in the past, but also to start off basically.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were discussing as we're iterating on this opening sequence, because it used to be, it was all seen through Joel's eyes. But then it became a lot more interesting to think of it as you're seeing it through Sarah's eyes, because Sarah is really kind of, the whole game is about this relationship between Joel and Ellie, but here Sarah kind of embodies what the relationship is going to eventually become.
And that was probably one of the hardest roles to cast too, with Sarah.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that came in, and I love that this scene was, you know, that was one of the audition scenes. And it was so amazing when Hannah came in that it just, I mean, what you're seeing right now, that was the chemistry, and she was amazing. It's like, kind of like a younger Dakota Fanning. Just, there's an old soul behind those eyes.
Yeah, and she could turn it on and off between each take.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, she was crazy. She's amazing.
It's always a little awkward, right? You have a 12-year-old someone on the set, and you're doing this pretty dark stuff.
Especially with the way that we work, too.
All right, let's hold off on some of the jokes today, guys.
You started helping out with the mortgage then.
Yeah, you wish.
And this piece of music, actually, we were struggling to find which piece to play here. And then Gustavo wrote this thing for the VGAs just to play before we showed the trailer. And right away I heard it, I was like, that's got to go in the opening. This is the theme kind of like the relationship between Joel and his daughter that later becomes the theme between Joel and Ellie.
Hallican Drops,
Pelican Drops.
the name of the band on her t-shirt. And where did you get that?
My daughter came up with that. My 2.5-year-old daughter named one of her dolls that. And we're searching for a name for a band. I'm like, I got a name for a band.
So this is going to be the first time that I've ever seen this scene. This was one specifically that I really didn't want to once we did it. And when we first talked about doing this, in the very, very beginning, I knew this scene was going to come. And it was, I told you, I was like, give me a heads up when this day comes, because it's not going to be a good one.
Well, the thing with this scene, it's a super difficult scene to shoot. The first time we shot it, we did like at least 15 takes or something crazy like that. And then we thought we had it in the can. And
well, I thought.
Well, no, we all thought. We thought we came back to work and we started putting it in. And for me, there was just something that was, I felt like we could convey the same amount of emotion with less.
Yeah.
And it was a hard thing to tell Troy because everybody put so much into it, and it's like, we got to do it again.
Well, I remember that
we got to
day
come back to this.
When you came back and you told me that we have to do this again. Obviously, you know, you'll see why what we're talking about. But this is the defining moment for Joel. This is where he draws that line in the sand, where he has few moral lines left to cross. I'm so amazed with how well Hannah did, and
yeah, I mean, it was difficult to watch just on the mocap stage, and we actually had people after a few takes leave the set. They were like, I can't watch this anymore, and they just took off. But from a story standpoint, it's so important to show just what the violence does and how it like rips apart this family.
Well, then especially a lot of times in video games, you see blatant violence, but when you personify it and you put it on a face, especially that young face, and you see the devastation that just one life lost can do. And it's just, I mean, this was such a hard day. It was such a hard day for both of us. I mean, it was exhausting for her. It was exhausting for me.
So the opening credits, the thing with the opening, initially we didn't want to do opening credits, we didn't even have the idea for this, but the jump felt too sudden to go from Sarah dying to then 20 years later.
And making up.
We found that when people watch it in succession, they're not paying attention when we start introducing Tess in the world because they're still recovering from Sarah dying. So we're like, okay, well, let's have this opening sequence that can kind of help bridge the gap. And just had the idea of just seeing this time-lapse video of fungus growing, because so much of the disease and the outbreak is based on this cordyceps fungus that spread through spores. So we contacted a group at Sony San Diego who did this whole opening sequence for us, and they actually got these fungal kits where they grew fungus like in their bathrooms and filmed this over like days to produce this thing.
So everything you're seeing is actually it's real. It's not CG. It's not.
It's all
organic.
it's all, except for the spores at the end, which are CG. Everything is real. This whole journey is like a dreamlike state, and you constantly see people waking up, and you see this multiple chime with Joel, and it's as if he's like remembering the past. He's always having these bad dreams throughout the game.
That was always something that we had to keep in mind when we did this scene, because we shot this before we shot Sarah dying scene. So it's kind of like we knew that those were going to be in one way or another kind of butted up against each other. But this is such a great thing. Again, this was in the audition thing that we did when we were trying to find Tess. And when Annie walked in, it was just like, she walked in as Tess. We saw a lot of different people for that.
How was your morning?
And this was just such a great, because the relationship you see from going from Sarah and Joel to now Joel and Tess, it's just, I don't know, you see everything, like the house that he was in before was nicer. He looked nicer, and it's not just the years have passed, but those years that have passed haven't
This
been
also
kind.
gets into something interesting for me as a writer, which is you have a certain notion of characters or how you want the structure to be, and then once it's interpreted through actors like Troy, it changes. Like I've always imagined as Joel doesn't really care for Tess. He's completely shut down, and Troy treated it differently, which is I think he really cares for Tess, and even though he might not show it, and we just kind of embrace that. And you kind of see that later when Tess gets infected. That wasn't how the scene was originally envisioned, that Joel has such a reaction, but it became a lot more interesting to own that.
Well, and also how much this relationship changed over, I mean, time and different writing iterations and just conversations that we had about this. Even, you know, within the last month or so, we've had conversations about this. It's like, what is their relationship? Because we never define it. I think anybody else would have put it on the nose, they're lovers or whatever. There was one note that you gave, it's like, let's, for one specific take, and said, let's just assume that there was a fight last night over what, we don't know. This is that moment afterwards. So it was like this awkward tension between the two of us. But there's no like loving embrace, there's no kiss that Joel and Tess have. It's just such an interesting relationship.
And the challenge was to try to, how much can we convey just through nonverbal interaction?
Right.
Our first torture scene.
And it's with the lovely Robin Atkin Downs, which I was just joking and saying that it's not a Naughty Dog game if Robin isn't getting the shit kicked out of him.
He's been in every game since Uncharted 1.
And we just put him through the ringer on this one. Poor guy.
It was important to show just how far Joel has come, from the father you see in the opening sequence to here is a man that is willing to torture someone to just get
But it's
what
so
is essentially
interesting.
money in this world.
Right, but it's interesting because he's not, he's like that brutal enforcer. It's kind of like that scene in LA Confidential where he's Russell Crowe. She's running the show. She's the dominating one, and I'm just brought in to be the
She's
muscle.
the brains of the operation.
Yeah, clearly.
Stop! Ugh.
Quit your squirming.
That's all Robin's expressions too. It's so great. They did such a great job with the facial.
Yeah, it's important to note also, all the facial is hand animated. We don't use any facial mocap. We find that we get better results with our animators.
And it almost becomes one-to-one.
Yeah.
It's just genius.
I just need more
Here it is. Wait for it.
Give me a week.
You know, I might have done that if you hadn't tried to fucking kill me.
Vote of hesitation.
Guns.
It's gonna cost you.
I can't.
We re-edited that. We used to show the break, and actually it was less brutal than when we didn't show it.
When you didn't show it?
Yeah, when it's left to your imagination, it's a lot worse.
Yeah, but just you can see the way that his arm's positioned. But yeah, you're right. This is so revealing, not only about the relationship, but about, again, who Joel has become. To go from a father who just cares about, keeping his nose down and keeping the job and playing by the rules, to being a guy who could just literally break some guy's arm over guns. It's just crazy.
Come on. Yeah, fuck those fireflies. Just go get them.
She loved doing that scene too. Annie loved that. She tried not to smile every time. And I love it's just business as usual. It's back to it. It's like, all right, so now what?
And we're about to meet the very talented Merle Dandridge.
Ah, Merle. Now, here's something interesting about this. Again, going back to the audition, that process. We saw a bunch of different girls, even girls that we had originally seen for Tess, we brought back to see.
And they're all really
Marlene.
good.
They're fantastic.
And then Merle came in and just,
And
there
I
was
wasn't,
no question.
and I wasn't there for that. And
Ashley can chime in.
Or no.
Ashley was part of the audition for Merle.
When she came in, it was hands down.
Yeah.
It's like, that's Marlene, come on.
It's funny that all three of us knew like right away that Yeah, she needs to play Marlene.
But you said we ended up setting up a special thing just for her.
Yeah.
Because you're like, you've got to see her. I want you to
Yeah,
see her.
we had callbacks, and she was busy. She couldn't make it. And we had a special day of callbacks just to bring her in because we felt really confident that she could do it.
'Cause I felt like she was the only one who didn't play it all either super tough.
Or street, yeah.
Yeah, she kind of had
Yeah,
the
she
perfect
really straddled that
combination.
line.
It was so great. But we did that first scenes in the audition, literally first take, first scene. And she exits. It's at the very end of the game, and she turns around, she exits, and I turn around, look at Neil. I was like, I just mouthed, "Are you kidding me?" It's like,
and I
done.
mouthed, "I told you so."
Yeah, she did such a great job. This is another kind of thing that I think is interesting that's happening in video games, where we see two really strong women characters, female characters that aren't being over-sexualized. They're just strong women.
Here we go. Ellie's introduction.
Yep.
And this stuff is all shot out of sequence. So it's I don't know, maybe you guys should talk about the process of how you get into that state.
I'm trying to remember that. I just really like the fact that the first time you see Ellie, you see her knife first.
Right.
I just think that's
You see that
kind
she's
of
a
awesome.
fighter.
Yeah. I forgot that was the first time that you saw Ellie. That was the first scene. That just from the get-go, she's fighting.
Yeah, but it's not just she's fighting because she really cares for Marlene. That's kind of
Yeah.
the crux of this, is that you see these two characters really care for one another. And I love in such a short time you see between Marlene and Ellie, there's this connection that's so
Right.
important because that has to carry through to the end of the game when Marlene shows up again.
Well, even like just the positioning of the two people. I mean, it's Joel and Tess versus Ellie and Marlene.
And just like, it's so interesting watching, right, Joel here doesn't even make eye contact with her. He doesn't even acknowledge her existence.
Right.
She's not crossing to that part of town. I want Joel to watch over her.
Whoa, I don't think that's the best
Ellie.
idea.
Our first fight.
Here we go.
Bullshit!
I was close with his brother Tommy. Said if I was ever in a jam, I could rely on him.
Was that before or after he left?
Just reminding the player, like this guy you saw in the beginning, Joel's brother, he's changed too and he's been involved.
Yeah.
Just get hints of,
There's a falling out between the two of them.
And it's just as you go on, you're starting to fill in that 20-year gap.
Just cargo, Joel.
No more talking.
Which is pretty true to your writing too, because I'm like, so what happened here? It's always, what do you think?
What do you think happened there? Because I have no idea.
I don't have the time to write it.
Don't take long. And you, stay close.
For Joel, right, that's a hint. It's like, I don't want to be around this kid.
Right.
Right, because some subconscious part of him knows I could get hurt here.
Is it?
First moment alone.
What does Joel do?
Time for bed.
Takes a nap.
I'm tired.
What are you doing?
Killing time.
I do really like this scene.
Well, what am I supposed to do?
I am sure you will figure that out.
It's a great moment.
It's another one of those moments too where it's like, it just feels like Joel is just always exhausted. Like this world is just bearing down on him.
But I love that moment too, where she points out the watch, where we get to establish that watch that.
Yeah, and that's
Sarah
something
gave
we
me.
didn't have in the beginning. That's actually something we inserted after the fact. Not for this scene, but there's another scene where we have that.
But I also love, like you said, the kind of the juxtaposition between Joel and Ellie, to where Joel's just, like you said, weary and exhausted, and you have this total opposite, almost antithetical thing of like this naivete and this childlike behavior that's wanting to explore. And it
here
shows up in this.
she's talking about having bad dreams, like the idea that they are both carrying this baggage with them, and it's how they first connect.
Look how dark it is. Can't be any worse out there. Can it?
What on earth do the Fireflies want with you?
Hey. Sorry it took so long. Soldiers fucking everywhere. How's Marlene?
What a great moment. He finally addresses her, finally connects on that level, and that moment's interrupted.
Well, it's also the first time kind of Ellie, if you think about it, opens up to him. She's saying, I'm scared, right? That was the subtext of
Yeah,
that question.
that's true.
Go get some guns.